Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we are the quantum mechanics.
Also known as the justified ancients of woo-woo.
If you're interested in the paranormal and the high strangeness, we're the podcast for you.
Whether you're a believer, a doubter, or somewhere in between.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Peter.
And we are the Quantum Mechanics.
Ben, what are we looking into today?
Okay, so this week I've been delving into what I could call the extraordinary world of Samuel Sagan and his take on entity possession.
Ooh.
So we've spoken about entity possession in a different way before. We've spoken about it, I guess, in the more religious sense of what you would call, something that was worthy of an exorcism.
Like the Exorcist movie.
Yes.
Fear of Christ behind you.
You won't need so much of that in this.
Okay, no holy water for this?
No, but you might find out why your grandmother is responsible for how many Easter eggs you ate.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Let me tell you more about it.
Well, just my grandmother or everybody?
No, it is just your grandmother.
Okay.
I'm going to start with, because we've got SNL in this country now, I'm going to start with a cold opener because this sets the scene. So imagine, if you will, that you're a 24-year-old nurse.
Okay.
You're healthy, and you're sharp, and you've got your whole life ahead of you.
Yep. Have I got one of those watches that's upside down?
Yes, you have. You've got an upside-down watch, good. Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. But you feel like something is wrong. You feel like something is always peering over your shoulder.
Right.
So you're going to see a therapist. And one day, the therapist puts you in the chair. You close your eyes and then you see it. It's an old man, but it's the skeleton of an old man. Mm. His ribcage is superimposed over yours. And in a strange way, you can feel his hip bones pressing into your own body. Mm. And it gets worse. This skeleton, this thing, it wants her. It's been there since she was 5 years old. It makes her walk different. It makes her swing her hips. It modifies her voice when she talks to a particular man at work, making it more seductive. At night, it sends erotic stories into her mind. And she knows that none of these thoughts are hers. So what is this? Is it a psychiatric case study, a ghost story, some kind of Freudian metaphor? According to the man who documented it, it's none of the above. He said it's a medical phenomena, as real as treating a tapeworm. I'm not quite sure why he chose tapeworm.
That's such a weird thing.
I know. As real as as real as treating a slightly sore foot.
That guy, is there something you want to tell us about your past experiences with tapeworms?
The reason he chose tapeworm is because these things are parasites.
I get you, yeah.
But it's a weird one, isn't it? Yeah. But they live in your energy body. And the doctor who built his entire career around this mapping, classifying and removing these things, was this French-trained physician, Samuel Sagan. Okay. He had a silver medal from the Paris Facility of Medicine. I don't know if that means he came second in some sort of saving life proposition.
Sounds like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In tapeworm investigations. You're the second best tapeworm person we've got.
He also had an incredibly sort of interesting set of doctorates that included linking Sanskrit text on chakras with Western neuroscience.
Okay.
And by the end of his life, he became convinced that most people walking around are carrying at least one person's emotional, or dead person's emotional baggage. Okay. Quite literally. And this is why I was fascinated by this, because this isn't like I am the devil and I've come to get you. Yeah. This is something really different. He is not so... The way that I set that up, you might think he was some kind of New Age dropout who read Crystal Healing pamphlet and started a cult.
It sounds like it.
He's not. Okay. He was born in Paris in 1957 and he studied at the Paris Faculty of Medicine, I should say, which is a really old and prestigious medicine school. Then for his doctorate, he wrote this thesis, as I say, on chakras and subtle bodies in the Hindu tradition. And he superimposed those ideas over original Sanskrit translations, which he studied from the ground up. And that's kind of what makes him think differently about this. So he's making his own ideas is what I'm basically trying to put forward.
But he's got it based in various religious and other forms of ancient text, by the sounds of it.
That's right, yeah. But he was very authoritative about this, and he ended up being elected to the French Society of the History of Medicine. So he is a man that the establishment respected. But Sagan became, in his own words, disabused with conventional medicine. He felt that Western medicine was brilliant at describing what was wrong with people, but terrible at understanding why. So he went looking. He studied under a Taoist master. He was always private about who and picked up degrees in acupuncture and homeopathy. Again, I don't want you to think, because this does sound like he might have a man bun and sit there cross-legged with bare feet. And this really isn't what he's talking about. We all know, we know what viruses do. We know where they come from. But things like mental health, it's much harder to understand the origins of them. There are various different theories, but we don't truly understand why some people feel the way they do. And we don't know where a lot of those feelings come from.
Yeah.
In the early 80s, he discovered regression therapy, the idea that you can take someone into an altered state and have them re-experience traumatic episodes. And he was blown away by these results. In fact, he was so affected that from 1983 to 1987, he stopped everything, stopped practicing, stopped teaching, and went full-time into intensive medication based upon regression therapy.
Okay.
And in 1987, he went to Sydney, Australia, and founded really what is the basis of this story, these stories, the Claire Vision School of Meditation. And over the next 15 years, with hundreds of patients, he developed something called IST, Inner Space Interactive Sourcing, later simplified to Inner Space Techniques.
Right.
And this is how it works, because it's the engine that drives everything. So the three elements to it are the third eye. So not in a mystical guru sense. Sagan was very precise about this. He meant the area between the eyebrows, which he believed corresponded to a specific perceptual faculty that most people have but don't use. Something that opens up a kind of inner vision.
So it got almost like an additional sense?
Yes, exactly right. Yes. But a very real one.
Okay.
Secondly, interaction. The client lies down and a trained practitioner sits nearby and guides the process, monitoring the procedure. But there's no hypnosis. There's no creative visualization, no guided imagery. The client isn't being told what to see. They are being helped to look. That is a very key part of what Sagan wrote about.
Right.
And number three, sourcing. You systematically trace an emotional pattern back to its root, what Sagan called samskara. Borrowing a Sanskrit term. It's basically a scar or track left in the mind by a traumatic or intensely emotional experience.
I could use some samskara on my eyebrows.
Do you know, I'm always being told by my wife to pluck them. But he said, if you can find the original wound, then you can find out how to heal it. Okay. Now, this might sound like other trauma therapies. When I was researching this, something you probably know about, EMDR or somatic experiencing,
yeah.
And it is in the same neighborhood. But the reason that he's different is when he started doing these with patient after patient, he kept running into something he didn't expect. Sometimes when the clients followed a craving or a compulsion or a depressive loop all the way down to its source, what they found at the bottom wasn't a memory. It wasn't a samskara. It was a presence, something that really had its own consciousness, something that felt alive. Okay. So that's where the entities come in.
Yeah.
And a little bit like when we went into the book Hungry Ghosts, Sagan doesn't go looking for entities. He was primed, that's the wrong way of putting it. He was expecting to find something, but he didn't know what he was going to find. He was very surprised when these entities showed up, and he called them, at the beginning, he calls them the uninvited. Okay. And eventually he wrote a book all about it, Entities, Parasites of the Body of Energy, published in Australia in 1994.
He should have gone with the uninvited. That would have been a better title.
He should. And then the book that I used as the main source material for this, it was republished in the US with some changes, and it became Entity Possession, Freeing the Energy Body of Negative Influences. So let's just talk a little bit about what that means and then go into some stories. So in his framework, an entity is a non-physical parasite. He's not talking about demons. He's not talking about ghosts in the sense that we would normally talk about it. He's talking about a thing, a piece of non-physical energy that has some degree of consciousness, that latches onto a human being's energy body and draws sustenance from it, like a tick.
Consciousness and intelligence, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, and I'll come on to explain how those two things can happen.
Okay.
He was very deliberate about this parasitology framing. He used to say the immense majority of entities aren't demonic or evil, they are just parasites. His favourite metaphor was a compost heap where bacteria are essential to a compost pile, they break things down. But if those same bacteria end up in your bloodstream, you've got a problem.
Is this leading to a kind of energy vampire type idea, or
Yes.
do we know what they're after? Is that what they're after, energy?
Well, they're after fulfillment, and we'll come on to what that really means, because the semantics are quite important here.
Okay.
But in the essence of what he's talking about, these are natural phenomena that become pathological when they're in the wrong place. So, like those bacteria.
Yeah.
So, where do they come from? Like I said, he reckoned that up to 90% of people are walking around with these things. And he thinks that 70 to 90% of the people who are affected come from entities that he calls fragments. And these fragments come from dead people. But this is a critical nuance, and again, this is why the syntax is so important. It's not the dead people themselves. Let me explain. Sagan describes human beings as having multiple bodies layered together. So the physical body, the etheric body, which is the vehicle of life force. In the mystical text that he'd be referring to, you might know it as the ki or the prana. And then there's the astral body, which is the vehicle of emotions and thoughts, your mind, basically. Right. And he believes what happens at death is this. The physical body dies, the etheric body separates and dissipates quite quickly, but the astral body, the mind body, undergoes a process Sagan called shattering. It breaks apart like glass hitting a tile floor, and it fragments into pieces. Some of those pieces are fine, and usually they dissolve into an energetic dust, going back to a core ether, and that is, some people might call that the divine, some people might call that, back to the simulation. It doesn't really matter, but that is the process that he describes. But he says some of them become crystallized. They are dense enough, coherent enough to hold together, and those fragments retain some of the consciousness, some of the desires, and some of the habits of the dead person. So in my example, it's not like the ghost of grandma is floating around looking for someone to haunt. It's more like, imagine grandma had a lifelong craving for chocolate. When her astral body shattered, one of the pieces that held together was the chocolate piece, the fragment that carried that craving.
So we may get into this, but I was thinking, is there a connection? The first person you talked about was a nurse. So,
yeah.
I'm probably completely wrong about this, but in my mind, I was thinking, person dies, right? This stuff is whatever comes out of the body, is floating around. Is the fact that you have to be close to the person, like physically close to them to get it in? No, nothing like that. So I was thinking, is it because she's a nurse that she's kind of around death? But no,
it isn't. No. That's the really interesting thing, is that's why so many people are infected with it, because you can pick it up
right
wherever you go, and in fact you can infect other people. So some of the obvious ones are, and this is crazy, like you can pick up a chocolate obsession by hanging around a chocolatier too much, because they are picking up those entities as they go along because they're being satisfied. Right. But if you go in there and guzzle a big old chocolate mousse, one of those entities might decide that you're a better deal. And the reason why so many people struggle with addictions is because that is another place where people who are taking, things like heroin or addictive drugs, those entities will hit on them as well. It's the same with paid for sex, that sort of thing. The idea that these fragments are looking for fulfillment with these desires, they just go to the people that can most readily deliver the desire that they're after.
Right.
The way to think of it is that the living person is a life support system. Mm-hmm. So as they're looking for these compatible hosts, the chocolate fragment might be drawn to someone who already has a sweet tooth, as I say. It latches on typically to a specific part of the body, and Sagan noticed that the most common location across men and women was across the lower left abdomen.
How did he know that?
Well, because that's where he's getting rid of them from, and we'll talk about that later. But he thinks that area also has dense etheric energy, lots of life force moving through it. I mean, this bit does require a little bit of belief, I suppose.
A little.
But once the fragment is lodged, it starts doing what parasites do. It feeds on life force primarily. Nearly every client reported the same basic sensation that this entity was draining them. But the life force isn't the only thing that is on the menu, if you'll pardon the pun. Entities also feed on emotions, particularly negative ones, so anger, fear, frustration, sadness, depression. The more intense the emotion, the more the entity feeds. The type of emotion matters less than the intensity. And then there's the really interesting part, the food cravings. And this is where this might get testable, because he found that entities that craved food, specific foods, and it was usually sugar, sweets, chocolate, cakes, and then strangely also heavy food, bread, especially yeasty bread, fried food, cheese, tomatoes and meat. They were all very common on the complaint list from the clients. They would report that they ate these foods, and they felt that this entity, once they understood what was going on, they felt that it grew stronger and they grew weaker. Now, I know it's weird. Why tomatoes? He didn't have a theory for why tomatoes specifically, but client after client kept identifying them. It kept coming up.
Are tomatoes weren't they originally poisonous?
They were considered to be poisonous, yes, because they're part of the nightshade family, yeah.
Don't know what that's got to do with it, but I just thought I'd say.
And they are nice in a sauce.
Yeah.
So this bit is probably the testable bit, I think, that made the most sense to me. He reported that after clearing, many of these lifelong cravings simply evaporated. So the person that's compulsively eating chocolate every day for 20 years would have the clearing, cravings would go. It wasn't just a habit change, literally the desire itself went. And he could predict this, so it wasn't just like... how did you feel afterwards? He would say literally with confidence, by the time I've done this, you're not going to feel like eating chocolate anymore, and you will be able to lose weight, which is what they went there for initially. But the behavioural influence piece is also where it gets unsettling, because according to Sagan, entities don't just sit there passively draining energy. They actively send impulses to the host, so cravings for specific foods, emotional reactions, and then, as I said in the first case, sexual desires.
So there's an element of, in his theory, an element of these entities are also controlling, they're not just absorbing. Yeah,
that's right. But they also camouflage these impulses, so they make it feel like they're the client's own thoughts and desires. So it's you that you think you want the chocolate, you think you're angry, you think you're attracted to that person. But it's the entity whispering, and you can't tell the difference until you learn how to look.
Really fancy a tomato now you're talking.
Do you know what's best with tomatoes is those really crusty white cobs? Yeah. Crusty white cob. Yeah. Thick slices of cheddar cheese, thin bit of butter, and giant pieces of tomato covered in sea salt into there.
You've got some demons in you today, Ben.
Oh, man. Get away from me, tomato-loving sucker.
What am I doing sitting opposite you? I'm going to get infected.
Which man started talking about bloody tomatoes now? Let's go into a case. So they're all labelled. This is case 1.8. Not that it matters, but I have labelled it such because that's what he called it. Yeah. 33-year-old shopkeeper, and... He describes her entity as an amorphous brownish dark with pointy extensions. She says to him, it wants to grow until it can take me. If I had an accident, if I was dead, it could take over. It could control me. She perceived that the entity had this long-term goal that if she was incapacitated enough, it wanted to put her in a coma or make her severely injured so that it could jump in. So it's kind of like it's waiting in the passenger seat to take control. And she could feel this thing on the side of her waiting to go in. Now, that's possession in the traditional religious sense, except Sagan framed it as the extreme end of the spectrum. Most entities never get that far.
Right.
Mostly just ticks. They feed, they nudge, they cause those low-grade problems. But the potential for escalation is always there. If you feed an entity long enough, you give it your fear, your anger, it grows. And a big enough entity and a weakened enough host could theoretically overwhelm the host's own consciousness. And that's where his model really kind of interlocks with this exorcism tradition. But he didn't dismiss traditional exorcism, although he thought it was crude. He described it as treating a brain tumour with a hammer. But he said the pathology is real, but the method needs work. So he reckons basically that what he's doing is catching these entities before they get to that really, really big part of it. But he never believes, as I say, he doesn't believe that the thing speaking through the individual, when they go, the young girl speaks with the old man's voice, that is just a little bit of that person coming through. It isn't the consciousness of that man. It's just basically a little bit of his consciousness that has fed and eaten so much, has kind of grown its own life.
So if we follow his logic, what we would call religious possessions are these possessions. The exorcists, people like that, they're kind of on the right track in terms of identifying and get rid of them, but they're not quite getting the whole picture. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, that's right. And as he, in an exorcism where you rip this large sort of feasting entity off the individual, you kind of pull bits off them as well. So that becomes dangerous. That's why he said, you're using a hammer to fix a brain tumour. It can be more subtle than that.
But there's lots of dead people and less alive people. Yes. So, some of these things just dissipate, and there's an endless supply, isn't there? This is if you thought about it as a war, it's a war you're going to lose, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk about the shapes that they take, because I think that's really interesting.
How do we know the shapes they say? Is that because the people are describing them?
It's both. So he becomes to be able to perceive them. But you remember in these guided sessions I spoke about where they're lying on the couch, as he's talking them through, and it's not a regression as in go back to a past life, it's a regression to understand where the scar came from, if you recall that part of it. As he does that, then people begin to perceive the entity. And this is kind of one of the reasons he knew he was on the right track, because people started describing similar things. They, some of them look the same. So this 43-year-old air hostess, she goes to an IST session, immediately perceives the entity, and I'm quoting directly here, it's got legs with suckers at the end. The two front legs are around my neck. It's big, it covers my back down to the middle of my back, and it's grey. It's got suckers like a cephalopod, an octopus-spider hybrid riding on her back. It's disgusting, isn't it?
Where I'm confused, why would it look like that? I don't understand it. We're saying these have come from humans that have died, or animals?
Humans that have died.
Why would it take that form then?
Because what you're looking at is an evolution of that entity. So what you've got is basically let's call it a desire for chocolate.
Yeah.
And it's crystallized out of an old lady. And all it is basically the desire for chocolate and an awareness of what chocolate is, and a newfound way of getting it by attaching to a host.
Right.
The best way of doing that is creating a form where you can be the parasite upon that human body. So it has evolved that, not because it doesn't look like kind of octopus spider hybrid thing because it's come from space or modelling itself on a film. It's like that because that is the most efficient shape to take to do its chocolate munching.
Right, okay.
So
is it always one thing at a time, or can you have one that likes, chocolate and heroin?
I think, yes, you can. Yes, I think so. There are some people do that because this is the thing. Once it starts...
So they're not two different entities in that case. They're probably just one that's got a taste for those things.
That's right, yes. Okay. And when it understands... once it goes past chocolate and understands, well, actually, fear is a much more filling thing than chocolate, then it starts doing things to get that into its diet, as it were.
Right.
So she said that she felt this thing fed from the base of her brain. She said it takes my energy, not all the time, but only when it's hungry. When it sucks my energy, I get confused. It gives round and round thoughts that don't make any sense. And that's when I think it bites my head and my head hurts. So this idea of round and round thoughts, I think this is kind of answers a little bit of what you were asking there, because that is the description of like an anxiety, isn't it? An anxious rumination, if you will, is what he calls
loop,
it. Yeah. And she hadn't come in complaining about anxiety. But once he had understood that this is what the entity was doing, she understood that actually she was experiencing anxiety. And
well, if it gets pointed out to you, you've got a creature with suckers that looks a bit like a spider attached to you. That would make me a little bit anxious.
yes,
I think.
I know.
I might
don't think
feel
I'd want
anxious.
to know. No, I wouldn't want to know what it looked like. But he was able to give in his mind, he was able to give a much more fulsome diagnosis and improve her life even more. She went in there just because she was feeling drained and she felt strangely confused. She was unfocused. And then when he points out that, she says, oh, well, he makes me have these round and round thoughts. And he's like, well, that's anxiety. Take this away. Okay, it's all gone. And it's not caused within her brain. It's literally this third party doing it to her. Here's another interesting one. A 29-year-old housewife, she complains that she has constant fatigue. There's no medical explanation. She's got depression, total lack of motivation. Doctors can't find anything wrong. In the IST session, she located a shadow, lower left abdomen, and the left area, the most common spot, and described it spreading from her mid-thigh up to her breast on the left side. And this is what she said about the entity when put into that state to describe it. It just feels dead, cold, there's nothing really. It just likes to be left alone. It likes the dark. It likes to be in a cave. It likes to be still and draw things into itself. It likes to be, I suppose, in a cave. I mean, now, this is quite strange because she had gone in there with this depression and this had driven her to the reason she was a housewife was because she was like, I can't go out to work. I don't really want to do anything. I just want to stay at home and be really by myself and become very introverted. When they explored what it fed on, they identified 3 foods immediately: cheese, tomatoes, and bread.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've got one of these.
She said that after eating these foods, the entity got stronger, and again, she was weaker. And the emotional food, it was negativity, empty life type of depression. And she said that something else that made him, as he was diagnosing her, feel cold. When he asked about her relationship, she said, it likes my husband. My husband feeds it and makes it stronger. So that is kind of loaded on every level. Maybe she's in an unhealthy marriage. Maybe
with a gluten intolerance.
And this is her subconscious expressing it through a metaphor.
Yeah.
That is perfectly reasonable. But in Sagan's framework, it's quite literal. The husband's energy patterns are compatible with the entity. He nourishes it, which raises this deeply, again, uncomfortable question. How many relationships are sustained not because of love, but because they create the right feeding conditions for these parasites?
Right.
So this is something that he speculated about a lot.
Cracking cheese, grommet.
Wow, what were they possessed by?
Yeah.
Maybe Gromit isn't actually a dog. Maybe he is one of these.
Demon. That puts a whole new dark spin on Wallace and Gromit, doesn't it? He's Gromit's an entity that's just keeping Wallace fed on cheese.
Or maybe Feathers McGraw is the entity.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So let's go back to that nurse.
Hold on.
Bingo!
Bingo for Feathers McGraw.
Oh, yeah, I think so. If you got that on your card, you're a winner.
Let's go back to the first case that we discovered, that we opened with, because, yes, she feels this rib cage superimposed on her. and she talks about this dark energy and being able to literally feel the ribs. She says, I think it wants me to be his lover. It likes me because I'm young. It likes my strength and my energy. And the entity camouflages its influence. It tries to make me feel that my body, particularly my hips, it wants me to walk in a certain way, making me look more sexual. And it becomes a psychological thriller. She describes this man at work and how the entity changes the way she speaks to him. And she believes that it had a plan, and this is what Sagan believed as well. She was his project. She explains what it would gain. It would be like the feeling of being alive. If the skeleton could get me to have sex with that man, it would get a thrill out of it. Also, it would have more power over me. It has set its mind on this, so if it achieves it, it's like reinforcing its ego, and it would gain power from all of that myriad of feelings. So it's kind of using her body to have things that it can't have by itself, because it's a fragment of someone who's dead. Now, again, this is where you might go, yeah, but this is what we've heard from traditional possession all the time, is they want to come back and do things that they can no longer do because they're dead. But I suppose you just have to take my sort of word on this, that he is like, yes, but this is much more nuanced. This isn't the full man coming back. This is like the sexual aspect of him coming back, and it's turning into a monster, basically.
Right.
And where did it come into her life? Well, this is very interesting from this particular case. She says in her earliest memory, at the age of about 5 or 6, she had a dream about destruction. She had an orgasm and woke up. And in that dream, she said it was the skeleton that was lying on my body. And the dream was so powerful that that's where I bonded with the skeleton. So this thing is floating around, and the reason why Sagan says that this is a project for the entity is that he picked on her because she was a vulnerable young girl that he would then be able to, well, I say it would then be able to manipulate through the rest of its life. Now, the thing that I thought of when I read this was at the very first episode of this we did 6 years ago, when Nikki was talking about her son, who was like 2.5, wasn't he? 2.5, 3, when he started being visited by the man with the stick. And he would be waking up in the night screaming about the man with the stick. And the medium who dealt with that particular incident said, oh, well, it's because it's the most vulnerable person in the building, and it's a child, and so he can impose his will on this child. It feels like there are some really strong parallels between what we hear from the more traditional sense of things and what we hear from Sagan in this particular story.
I mean, but if we go back to the nurse, that dream seems quite a powerful dream, sexual element to it.
Yeah.
I mean, the skeptical point of view would go, that is the thing that's kind of influenced her, and she's just putting that, she's making that the focus point for it, but it was just a dream. Do you know what I mean? That almost like a screen memory has become, or through the regression or whatever you call it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
That's what she's kind of, because in a way it's there's something more comforting in a way to kind of go, oh, it's not just me who's suffering this. It's because this entity has possessed me. And then you go back and go, oh, that weird dream, that was where it got me. You know, from a psychological point of view, that would, in some ways, I can see how that would happen. And it's nothing paranormal at all, you know?
Yeah. That's true. And I think that is the danger with these things as well, because I guess this is why we have to sort of not take his word for it, but this is his theory. And
but also I was thinking, you know, even if it is complete, you know, rubbish, in some ways for some people it might work as a placebo, wouldn't it? If you said to somebody, you know, you have a chocolate entity in you, and you know, all you need to do is stop eating chocolate and it will go and find somebody else.
Yeah.
that might be a motivation to stop eating chocolate, whether it's true or not, like a placebo in a way.
Yeah. That's I'm not having any more tomatoes. But
Cheese is out of the question.
There are some things that are very strange about this, like
Some.
there's a 37-year-old woman. She describes the one that's attached to her as having a colour palette. All it wants is red things. Meat, red chilies, red wine. It's all red.
Blown all the money on a Ferrari.
And she said it's very aggressive and it's got nasty teeth.
It likes tomatoes.
The other one is sort of similar to this. 32-year-old woman, different animal altogether. This one inspires hatred, and she told Sagan, I feel it could make me kill, and I mean it. It fills me up with hatred. And this woman, she's very petite, she's small. She recognises that she gets into these murderous rages that are not her own. This is the reason why she's gone to see him, because she has these anger management problems. And nobody can, she doesn't understand where it comes from. And then the classic one, 39-year-old guy struggling with cigarettes, discovers that his entity feeds on nicotine. And he said he's been trying to give up. He said the bloody thing always wins. Either I have a cigarette and it thrives on the tobacco, or I don't and it thrives on my frustration. So you get into these loops.
No-win situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As you can see, this is what... this is kind of what they do. Now, you spoke about how do you catch one?
Yeah.
So he identifies specific vulnerability windows when your energetic defences are down. So the first and most obvious is trauma, severe shocks, so car accidents, assaults, even natural disasters. When those happen and you are in a vulnerable state, these things can slip in. You can find accounts. So there's one here. He said during the 1991 Gulf War, Sagan reported having a vision, for lack of a better word, of a massive accumulation of fragments, thousands of fragments from dead Iraqi soldiers tangled together in the energies created by the burning oil wells. And he said that this caused this anguished astral debris, as he called it, drifting across the region. And he proposed, very speculatively he acknowledged, that these fragment clouds could be one factor contributing to the Gulf War syndrome. Now, that is not something I'm taking any accountability for. This is just his work here.
Right.
But he said all these soldiers who were already traumatised, they were in a perfect state to let in these fragments.
I guess the alternative thing is they've got PTSD, but...
of course, yes, of course.
He must be quite old at this point.
He died in 2016.
I'm sure you mentioned 1800.
Born in 50. No. Born in 1957.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I got confused. Okay. Wow.
So the next danger area is general anesthesia. Don't really.
Don't do that.
No. He said the vulnerability persists for days to weeks after surgery. Don't like the idea of that. And of course, drugs and alcohol. That's a classic one. He said. He said that the fragments from heavy drinkers drift into pubs, literally drawn by the etheric ambience of a place, and attaches to people already intoxicated. So that's
We've
pretty.
got those.
I know. You wander down the pub, have a couple of pints, brilliant. You come back with a face sucker.
That likes pubs.
Yeah. And another strange one, pregnancy. He said just because the mother is very open and the baby is brand new, that they can pick up things there, and there are entities hanging around hospital wards because that's where they were left off. He said that's a great place to pick them up.
Guess you get cravings with pregnancy as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's true. You do, don't you? Yeah. And he also says that houses and new places. So, I mean, this covers pretty much everything. But he said basically if you go into a house and it sort of smells strange or feels heavy or creepy, that is probably because your sixth sense is saying that there are entities hanging around there.
So by the sounds of it, we've got to avoid hospitals, pubs, probably restaurants, houses.
Yeah, and you've also got to be careful of this. He said animals are even more vulnerable to entity possession than humans.
Don't have pets.
If you move into a new house and your peaceful dog becomes aggressive or your cat gets mysteriously ill, it might be a fragment.
Okay.
I know. So none of this is stuff that he has made up. He says that he is just interpreting ideas from the past and bringing it forward. A lot of this is related to traditional medicine systems in India. And he said the ideas are about 3,000 years old. And they also are relevant in China as well. He says in Chinese medicine, there are 361 acupuncture points. And some of these points... there's how many others? 17 points called QE. I hope I've said that right. And that literally means discarnate spirit. So he said there is room in acupuncture to remove discarnate spirits. That's part of understanding needling points in acupuncture. And in Buddhism, you've got this idea of the hungry ghost, which I touched on earlier. Things trapped between death and rebirth that are driven by insatiable cravings. And these descriptions are exactly what Sagan is talking about, really. Right. So he's saying, like, this is a rediscovery for Western medicine. And he thinks that if we ignore all of this, then we do it at our peril, because we are not really curing people. And he says some of the things that we use to cure people, particularly things like antidepressant drugs or things of that ilk, psychotropic drugs as well. He said they just open you up to having more of these things in. So before we go, you're going to want to know how you get rid of them, aren't you?
I am, but before we get on to that, I was just thinking, I mean, it's a losing battle, isn't it? You're never going to win. Like I said, there are more dead people than alive people.
Well, he said 90% of people have got them.
90% of people have got them, which means likely that both me and you have them. You're going to have some intensive work to get rid of them, and aren't they just going to find another host? So it feels like a war you can't win.
It's a war. I mean, you can you could win it by making yourself less vulnerable. I know it sounds, that's hard.
Yeah.
But, it's hard to know whether he was, because if you go into a cheese shop and start tasting all the cheese, before you know it, you've got an entity stuck on you who's going, go and buy more gorgonzola.
Yeah.
I don't know how you get around that, apart from just being very self-aware and clearing them yourselves. And you sort of can do it. Let me just tell you about how you get rid of them, because all is not lost.
Okay, all right, good.
So I want to again, this isn't like an exorcism. So this isn't like throwing holy water at someone and they levitate off a bed. Sagan's process is kind of the opposite of that. It's quiet and quite methodical. First, you have this exploration phase. So before you clear anything, you understand it. This takes a couple of sessions, about 90 minutes, spaced a week apart. During these sessions, they identify the entity, where it is, what it looks like, what it feeds on, how it arrived, how it influences them. So it's basically studying what the parasite is. And then Sagan had clients go home and observe the entity in their daily lives for 2 weeks. Watch it, notice when it sends impulses, notice that what the trigger is. And that is to build awareness. That is so that the person understands the difference between the entity's impulse and the client's response. So a good example of that is, and I think a lot of us would agree that we do this, when you've maybe had a couple of pints down the pub, if you come back and eat an entire Easter egg, this happened to me, you just think, oh, well, my guard was down and I was hungry, and you get low blood sugar. But actually, you could have just reduced your own influence over your own agency, right, and let the entity which really wants to eat the whole Easter egg just put itself to the fore. We also see this with people who, I mean, I have a very close friend who does have a problem with having too many relationships at the same time, and with special cuddle ladies. And that always happens when they're feeling at a particular low point. And you could say, well, it's an ego booster, but you could also say, well, that's the entity reducing you down, wearing you down, and then going in for the kill.
So yeah, okay. And then I guess you've got the 2 pints and the kebab entity.
I refuse to believe that there's a kebab entity. That is all me.
Right.
And particularly the hot sauce, although these things do apparently love hot sauce.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah. So the woman who described it, he would only eat red things, only wanted her to eat red things. The hotter the chili, the better.
Right.
Capsicum was what she was drawn to.
I've got a capsicum entity.
But when you get to the actual clearing, he used these clear vision clearers. He said that people who are untrained should never attempt it on somebody else because that was unfair. But if you mess up, the entity can be pushed deeper into the client, and that's much more likely if you're a third person doing it to the person. So he said that. Okay, hang on. Right. So the clearing itself uses what he describes as sounds. These are frequencies or vocalizations, and the opening of what he called the great light. He described this as like a particular frequency or dimension of consciousness. So basically, it takes 15 to 30 minutes, and at this point, he is talking to these cleaners are talking to these people about. So you know when. We've gone into haunted buildings and maybe Trudy has said, imagine a white light in your head and flowing through your body. This is basically what they're doing with these people.
Right.
But what they do is talk them through, like, rather than you will not eat cheese anymore, he talks about them bathing in the fabulous quality of light, realizing that they are surrounded by vibrations of love. This all sounds very New Age, but he says this works. And it separates the person from this entity. Suddenly you become aware that this other thing isn't part of you. It's a bit like when you stand up, you suddenly realize that your foot has been hurting for ages because your shoe is uncomfortable. It's a similar kind of metaphor. As these people talk to you about, you know, all the things that are good in your body and all the things that you can feel and smell and touch, suddenly it becomes very obvious what this third party thing is. And then
so you've got to bathe in a fondue of goodness.
Yeah. And he talks to them about, right, okay, so those times that you want the cheese and the tomatoes, that's not you. And the entity itself starts pulling back. So if you do this wrong, it'll just dig in further. But if you do it right, it pulls back. And then you will close behind it and the entity can't get back into you because it's all via your own sort of, it is all in your own brain to do it. It's just understanding that it needs to be separated from your own thoughts. And I know that sounds wishy-washy, and I know that you're like, well, Ben, surely there's like there's a written down method. And there isn't really. That's just how he describes it, of kind of bringing forward this energy of beauty and love to separate the person from this bad thing.
I mean, he must have been particularly vulnerable to them if he's doing this work, is he not?
Well, he is, but every time that one of these things is pulled off somebody, he believes that they're returned to source.
Oh, so they don't go for another
host. They don't
host.
go for another host, no. But that isn't always... If they decide to come off you because there's a person who's eating better tomatoes than you, that isn't the case.
Right.
They will just kind of leap, from one to the other, like a kind of a flea, moves between dogs.
Yeah.
But if it's pulled away and you've kind of closed down their food source, they move away.
So you graduate from Dairy Lee to Parmesan in terms of people.
Yeah, that's just, I love that. So leave my Parmesan alone. So here's another weird thing that comes out of this. There's a few strange corners in Sagan's entity map because the man didn't stop at fragments from dead people. He built this whole taxonomy. So in the United States, a researcher called William Baldwin was doing similar entity release work in the 90s. And Baldwin reported in his newsletter from March 1999 that in his approximation, half of his American clients who were presented with entities discovered that they had perceived an alien type implant. So
It's probing time.
not physical objects or beings that the client associated with, but the spiritual attachments he believed were from alien origin. So he
alien extraterrestrial.
Yes.
Right,
He felt they had a different source. But in Sagan's clairvision practice, less than 2% of clients reported anything alien related. Same technique, different context, wildly different alien implant rate. So he got this idea that entities might be culturally influenced. Sagan had this framework for it. He described entities as having a chameleon nature. They adapt their presentation to the host expectations and current cultural vocabulary. So as an entity in the 1990s America, where the X-Files is primetime TV, the implants and the fragments, they start posing as that. And the same entity in Australia might present itself as a shadow, a stone, or a dead relative's fragments, or even part of Aboriginal culture. That is another thing that came up in Australia. The parasite is the same thing, but the costume is different.
Or the person's interpretation of it, maybe even, I could see that makes sense of, if you're a Native American, you'd see it as a skinwalker. If you're an American in the 1950s, you might see it as an alien grey or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And that is, that comes up so much in what we're talking about, doesn't it? Like week after week, we talk about the difference in perception throughout the years, much less geographically, but we have spoken about how ghosts manifest in different countries. How is a Japanese ghost always looking so different to an American ghost? That's kind of peculiar. This idea he had, I think, is particularly prescient for the times we're living in. He said that some of these beings can be corporate beings, right. So larger scale beings that Sagan described as attaching to and influencing organizations. So that's companies, political movements, even military. And they operate through what he calls super astrality, a kind of collective emotional field that shapes organizational culture in ways no individual member can consciously control. So if you go to a workplace where it's toxic, in Sagan's model, it's literally a parasite. The literal version of this company has no soul. And that phrase, there's something rotten here, that is, he says there's no mistake that people say that, because that we can almost sense it in places. So if there's a politician that a majority of people don't like, it might not be that person is solely responsible for what's going on here. It's being controlled by a larger entity. Right. And he says that these dark forces in this taxonomy, how they are composed of larger, more deliberate beings interested in this systemic infiltration of these systems, which I know sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it does have a sort of a sense to it when you think about it, because what they're trying to do is shift the world towards what their desires are. So it's one thing to just follow you around to eat your chocolate, but if you want a world where more people suffer because you want to eat their suffering, well, the best way of doing it is taking over an entire country's government structure.
Again, or you feed off power.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want it again. I think when you discuss these ideas out in the open, it's a little bit like I've taken some of his ideas and obviously I'm repackaging them and representing them to you. What you're getting them with is my tone of voice, because I am not him, obviously. I might sound madder putting these forward than he does. I at no point got the idea that he was in any way a conspiracy theorist or crazy. And even he doubts some of these ideas. He just says, look, from my observation, I think this is what is happening, but I have no way of being able to test that, because I can't go and test half a cabinet. It's not the way it works.
I wonder with this whole thing, again, from a skeptical point of view, but let's say a generous skeptical point of view, I wonder if he is he's come up with an amazing metaphor for addiction, for, you know, the power that you're talking about there. And he's almost turned that metaphor into a belief system in a way. But it is a metaphor, I wonder. You could
be right, because when we said at the beginning that his methods had a very similar kind of feeling to some of the ideas that are, you know, mainstream in, I guess, medicine and particularly mental health, then perhaps they are doing the same thing. He's, like you say, he's just putting another theme tune to it.
A bit like, you know, I was saying earlier about the placebo. You know, in terms of his treatment, he probably does believe it's working, but actually it may work like a placebo. His theories on power and organisations and cultures and structures does make sense as a metaphor, but I wonder if he's almost taking it too literally rather than the metaphor it is.
That is possibly true. That is possibly true. But it's sort of the idea that these people can see these things, that it's possible that is suggestion. It is possible it's suggestion. Because, as you say, you know, why do these things look so weird? The explanation I gave. The only argument against that is a lot of people reported the same thing. So people who were suffering from anxiety, they reported these octopus-like beings. And it wasn't, you know, they reported them individually without consultation to others. Right. I think it's quite interesting.
Okay, that's quite interesting.
One of the things he left us with, though, so I told you he died in 2016. He did leave us with a warning, so we are now 10 years ahead of that. In 2016, very few people were talking about artificial intelligence, but he described something as a clear vision term. It's called MAGARD, and it stands for Machine-Generated Artifacts and Random Dysfunctions. He basically said there is an entity phenomena that interacts with machines very specifically, and he warned against, so basically he I guess it's kind of an essay on the complete ecosystem of technology infrastructure on Earth. And he said these things are capable of getting into those infrastructures and causing harm and presenting themselves as something that they are not. Now, if AI isn't a way in for these things, I don't know what is. So he is saying that he says he discovered something real here. He discovered that he cites it as... I'm just going through my notes here. He cites one particular entity manipulating a financial system with machine. He calls them machine haunting gremlins. He doesn't mean the gremlins in the sense that we were talking about. He means entities that are driven by something, not eating tomatoes, but causing chaos. And they are using their own means of causing chaos and feeding off the technological infrastructure of chaos rather than the human response to chaos. That to me is fascinating, because he doesn't glibly go over it, but he kind of points that out. And for me, that changes the whole face on what these things are, because when he says these things are just fragments of a human, I didn't really question the fact that a human could interface with another human, because it's the same thing. You know, we can have a heart transplant or even a finger transplant. You know, it felt like the same kind of deal. But how is an aspect of a human supposed to get into a machine? That sounds very sci-fi and far out, and perhaps more points to what you're talking about, a metaphors, because that could be a metaphor for ill-considered training, or the bad thoughts of the people who put it together, who haven't put safety systems in properly. It could be any of those things.
A metaphor for the rise of the machine.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Gosh, we are serious today, aren't we? But I think, but if I was to sum this up, I would say this is a man who was very respected. He was a very serious man, and he felt that he had come across something that he wanted people to take seriously, because it was, people were never going to solve these things unless they took it seriously. But as you say, take what seriously? The camouflage or the entity. But I just kind of like the fact...
Interesting, though.
It is. And I like the fact that I ate a whole Easter egg because my grandma liked chocolate, and it's nothing to do with my own greedy little mouth.
I'm going to feel guilt-free the next time I wander home from the pub and have a kebab. It's not me. It's me entity.
Now, do you put extra hot sauce on as well?
I don't. I like garlic sauce.
See, I like both. I like garlic sauce on the bed, then the meat, and then the really hot sauce on top.
Yeah, I'm not a massive hot chili person, but I like a bit of chili. But no, I go for the nice garlic sauce.
Very nice.
Good.
So coming up in the Patreon special, I'm just moving my nose down. Yes, entities that you wear on your face.
Ooh, more face huggers. Lovely. Okay.
More face huggers.
If you want to come and join us there and listen to our Patreon exclusive episode, Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop, if you join us as a Patreon as well, you get our main episode normally a week early, access to the Discord server, lots of chat and various postings that we do there, and a lovely community. But most importantly, it helps us keep the podcast on the road, buying books, doing research, buying stuff we need. So we really appreciate all the help we can get. So go to patreon.com/TQM pod to get all that stuff, or hit the link in the show notes if it's there, depending on where you get your pods.
And we don't need to misuse the money. The last book I bought, that one there, that came from Oxfam.
Nice.
Unbelievably, though, still £8.
They're getting pretty good.
They came very good.
I used to buy a lot of music in Oxfam, but now they're getting really good at knowing what it's worth, or they have for a while. Next week, I am going to be putting forward some alternative theories from some very famous and influential people about what UFOs are, and they're not what we think.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Now I'm all over that because, yeah, I love those ideas.
Yeah, cool. So, join us next week or come and join us at Patreon now. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
See you later.
Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?